Okay, my friends, another shocker du jour, Jurassic breakthrough. New species of plesiosaur discovered on the Isle of Skye rewrites evolutionary history. Well, how does it rewrite evolutionary history? I'm going to show you what they're basing on rewriting evolutionary history on versus what I have shown to rewrite evolutionary history. Okay, let's talk about rewriting history. This is on the web, information, Mudfossil DNA analysis from 9/23/15. This is almost 10 years ago. And this was my tests I had done. 3 of them were done by Helix Biolabs. Did a fabulous job. This was PCR DNA, the first ones done in the world on ancient giant human beings, because nobody will do it, and I don't think you can find anybody to do it today because they get scared. And this guy was attacked as well, and he called me. He said, "You be sure you let everybody know that you extracted the samples." He says, "I'll stand by the results." He said, "But make sure that you say that you were the one to extract." And I did. There were things that were just too big to send to him. I mean, they're gigantic things. So one was a 36-inch fingertip, and I'll show you the actual fingertip itself. And one was a lung, and one was a hand that was 36 inches wide, and I sent from the fingertip of that. And here's what they did. They did all the PCR tests and all. They were very, very sophisticated. This is top-end stuff. And it took a couple months at least. I think it was like 3 months. And these were the 3 different samples. 36-inch tip, the lung, and the mud tip. And this was all, they all came back positive for mitochondrial human DNA, which mitochondrial means the mother side. And there was excellent quality DNA sequences. Excellent quality. Excellent. He said they were just like raw blood. But, you know, of course it was in the powdered form. And I drilled into it. It wasn't like I scraped it off the surface. I drilled down inside, and it was just saturated with blood. Homo sapien, mitochondrial, B and D loop region. And I mean, they did everything. They did all the CTAGs and the whole 9 yards. So this is no puppy test. This was top end stuff, and it was expensive, and it took, like I say, several months. All right, listen to this now. This is they're changing all of rewriting evolutionary history based on flying reptiles, fossils, paleontology. This is the University of Bristol, apparently. Now, this is their evidence for rewriting evolutionary history based on this. It's based on this right here, rewriting evolutionary history. Well, guess what mine's based on? This right here. That's a left human hand, and it is human. It was DNA tested, and parts of it were CAT scanned, because I have the fingers and the knuckles and everything else. Put your left hand back like that. You have this tendon right here. All right, you have this cleave in between the pad on this side, which goes to your little finger, and on this side that goes to your thumb. This is the grip skin, which peels off because it's the heavy-duty skin on your hands. And on your feet, it does the same stuff. The rest of your skin is a little different, but on your, I call this grip skin. Now, I have the fingers and knuckles and all kinds of stuff from this. You see that? There's some kind of a bone there, and there's another one over here. And, you know, because you got all these little, like that bump right there is this bump right down at the end of my hand. And this is all the padding, and this is where the little finger goes off. Now, that's the hand. I had the finger from this DNA tested, and CAT scan. Here's one of the fingers. Now, this is what it looks like here. This is just the fingertip right here. Now, this right here, if you can see, is where you can see where the fingernail bed was. All right, this little cut in here is where the tendons attach to, and you can see it in the anatomical. They attach right here so you can move your fingers. Now, again, this is one of the fingertips, and it's about 7 or 8 inches long, and this is the CAT scan from the back of it. So this is the CAT scan looking right here, and it is a thumb. And you know why I know it's a thumb? It has all this extra stuff on one side. This is a right-hand thumb. You see how it has all the extra stuff on that side? It's flat on this side, and there's a whole bunch of extra stuff on that side. Now, what else is there that tips me off that this is a fingertip? Well, this right here, and this right here. You say, well, what's that all about? I say, well, one of them is black and one of them is white. Well, what's that all about? This one here is the vein, I mean, probably the vein side black. And this one here, you see the hole right there, that would be where the artery was, red. They run right out. The arteries run right out. And there's arteries run up one side and the veins come back the other side. This is the bone, and again, it's because it's a thumb. Normally, it'd be right in the center, but it's off to the side. Now, this is a 2D scan, and I also had the 3Ds done. And I guess I'm not showing it here. Oh, here it is. But you don't get a whole lot out of the 3D because it's completely nucleophilically substituted with invasive molecules. You do see the membrane areas where there's a transition between the bone and the flesh. You see there's a little bit of a different color to it, but you do see the membranes. The membranes are the key. But once you get inside, everything's gone. It's just, you can still see the blood vessels running up through it, but you can't see anything else other than that. So the 3D is nowhere near as good as the 2D. And Jesse Garrett and Associates, probably the top in the world, they did this for me. They did 7 CAT scans for me. And they are literally the best in the world. And they do 2D and 3D, and they do for all the top companies in the world, the biggest, hugest companies, and the best ones like Rolls-Royce and Boeing and all that kind of stuff. Now, and this was another one of the 2D. This was from the bottom, but this shows the apical tuft area, and you know, you don't see much if you don't know what you're looking at, but I do. Now, this was a lung. Now, that fingertip is as big as this lung. I'm not kidding you. And this is a lung. This is a lung too. Now, this one here, you can see the alveoli is still here. Now, what happened to this one was all the pleural washed off it, which is all the fascia stuff, this stuff here. And it's just, it got saturated with silicates. Like, this is a lung right here. But this is from Earth. And all of the stuff washed out of it, the blood and everything else, and it just stabilized on the structural components. This one here filled in with silicates. And blood came out of these little holes. And this is the latch that's on the bottom of all lungs. They have that little tab, just like this does here. Now, I drilled into here and took blood out of here. So it wasn't swabbed off the surface. And it was, you could see blood came right out of it, actual blood. This one, it's the same thing. If you drilled in there and put a bunch of water in there, blood would just come back out with it. And I just drilled out and took the dry stuff and sent it off to them, and they did the test. Now, the huge one, now this was good size. Well, the lung is our size. This finger, like I say, is about the same size as a lung in us, which would be 7 or 8 inches, something like that. This was the big fingertip. This was the monster. This is 36 inches from here to the very end of the tip. Now, I want you to take your time. Let me turn the lights off. Sometimes you get a better shot of this, and I'm going to come in close. Now, take your time, slow down. You move too fast. You got to make the moment last. Now, what are we looking at? This is a normal fingertip. This is not a thumb. And the reason I know that is because this is centered. And that right there is the pad that goes to your next bone so that they scrub against that pad and they aren't injured by bone to bone. These are the vein and arteries coming up to service, obviously, the blood. This is still the finger nail. All right, and it was in very good shape. It's a little bit eroded here where it's sort of, you don't see a real good clear outline here, but you certainly do here, and you absolutely do here. And I broke this piece off because there was no place I could find you can get blood out of. You can't get blood out of fingertips when you're in such perfect condition as this, because the outside layer is just as dense as can be. It's like a big rubber bag. And I'll show you that anatomically in a second. So what I had to do was, right around this edge here, this was sticking up, so I figured, well, I'll smash this part off and see what happens. And I did. I whacked it with a big, heavy sledgehammer, and it just popped right off like a scab. The skin, I'll show you what it looks like. It looks just like a big heavy piece of skin, which is what all it is. And it actually has the fingerprints on it. So don't forget, just take your time. And if you have to, come back and look at that. There's a little tiny piece of the fingernail is still like, you know, it eroded a little bit. But this piece is still on top, a little more of the fingernail than this. This is, some of it has come down, you know, like you have layers of fingernails. This is the outsidest layer, and then there's more layers underneath. This got broken off and has the fingerprints. Let's look at that. And don't forget DNA. And when I took the blood out of here, it was just like regular red blood. All right, I didn't show you how much blood there is in fingertips. They're saturated, absolutely totally saturated. And one side comes down is the artery, and it brings all the red blood from all through your body. And these are what they call the terminus. At the very end, there's 2 arteries on the side, and there's one at the tip. And then there's a whole bunch of little blood vessel webbing that brings it over to the return side, which is the vein, and it comes back up to your heart to get fixed back up again. At that point, it can't go backwards. There's all kinds of valves in here. In the artery side, it can go up and down, sideways, anywhere it wants, because it's all good fresh blood. But once it gets used and sent out through the capillary system into the lymph and into the veins, then you're done. It can't go back. So they have valves, and they can only go this way. If it goes back, it can't go back, which is something to consider. You know, it's not really important at this moment, but coming into them, there's like the blood vessels coming into them, and then of course, like I said, one side is artery, one side is vein. Now let's go back and look at these fingertips. This, like I said, one side was the artery, and I believe it would be this one, because the arteries run out. The red blood, like I say, it floats this way, that way. There's no valves. That's the key. These have valves, so they just stuck. They're stuck and stuck and stuck, and they turn black because that's the O2 version of the oxygen, which means it only has 2 oxygens. O3 is the red blood, but the red blood stays fluidy. Just the nature of it. It's called hematite. The black blood is called magnetite. And the bone is called bonatite. No, I'm just kidding. It's calcium primarily. But once they turn into nucleophilic substitution, this is 100% mud now, basically. You could find the traces of body chemistry inside of the blood vessels and so forth, primarily. That's what you have to look, because the rest has been pretty much transitioned. But once you hit these membranes, I call it fascia-facilitated fossilization. These membranes are fascia. They protect the contents, and they will only allow certain things to penetrate those. That's why they were the key to preserving these. They say, no, you stay out of here, you can't come in. And so these, and this was in a boiling hot flood because Venus almost hit Earth, all recorded by Velikovsky, who has now got to be taken seriously. All of his research that he did, I have supported with the Mudfossil stuff. These are giants. There's not one single culture on the face of this planet that hasn't had stories about giants and dragons. 0. And he found this everywhere, as did Plato, as did Herodotus, as did Apollodorus and Ovid, and all of them, 100%. And I've checked into all of them, Hesiod, and they all had the same stories, basically. You know, little variations here and there, but Velikovsky accounted for all of them, and they all took place at the same time, and it was not long ago, and it was the great worldwide flood, and that's what created the mud fossils. That's what allowed these things to preserve in such a spectacular manner. I mean, look at this. This is a 3-foot long fingertip. I figured this out to be about 160, 180 feet tall. This is what Guy would be if he was anatomically correct, and I believe they were. Now here, and this is why. Look at this. This is the fingerprints. These are fingerprints. Now again, take your time. Don't get crazy. That's the piece I broke off. Right up here was where the fingernail came down. I mean, it's a gigantic fingernail. And that right there is one of these, all right, which is a fingerprint ridge. All right, so the ridge right here is the same as that. In each one of these ridges you have these sweat pores. You see it up here, sweat pores? Inside the fingerprint ridges. In addition, this popped off just like a scab. It's just exactly like this. Dense, dense, dense skin is the grip skin. And then it just peels right off. And it was like basically separated from here to there. When I hit it with the hammer, it just popped right off. And again, I went down inside to where the blood is, which is saturated with blood, and that I collected. I was very careful, so it was no contamination. It was excellent quality. He told me there was no question as far as he was concerned. It was 100% certain that the sample I sent him was either completely, and it was tested for negative controls and all that, and there was no negative controls. They were all positive. So he said there's literally no question about contamination. Now, I could have substituted something if I was a liar and a fraud, yes. But I didn't do that. And these things are still here, and they're all available to be tested. So this is not silly, and this absolutely changes history. And then they're talking about this changing the history of evolution. Well, I think we should take a look at what I've shown. They did CAT scanning. I did CAT scanning. I did DNA testing. I did microscopy. I did chemistry. I did everything on those samples. I spent a lot of time, a lot of money, and it was all in the interest of science and truth. And I found out that truth is just not allowed. Just not allowed. And it's because it infringes on funding. All right, these people have just misled us all, and they keep saying, just give us another $100 million, and we could probably figure this out in the next 20, 30 years. And that's what's happened for 100 years. All right, this is the piece I told you I broke off. That is one of these fingerprint ridges. These are the sweat pores. Now, right up here was where the fingernail went, right in that crook right there. And I smacked it, and it popped right off of here. And this is how thick it is. That's how thick the skin is. Now, not only that, you see this side? It's just like glued. It's like somebody puttied it on there. It's not stuck on there at all. When I whacked it, it just popped right off. And this is the skin. And here it is right here. This shot's a little better, I think, easier to see. All right, there it is right there. And that's the fingerprints, and you see this. The back side of it is it's just like glued on, just like this thing shows up here. That's what this is. Now I broke it again so I could see a cross section, and that's the thickness of the skin on the guy's fingertip. That's this. And I put in a microscope, look at it. You can see, it's just a really tough, grippy mat. And there's a ton of silicon in there, 50 times more silicon in your grip skin than the rest of your body. You hear how clicky that is? This is some tough stuff. All right, anyway, that's DNA tested. All right, so I had 3 DNA tests done. They all came back as I showed you. I know I did. And so I wrote this book about this in 2015, about mud fossils and Velikovsky and minds in collision. Now, Velikovsky wrote Worlds in Collision, as I think I've already shown you, about how we were almost impacted by Venus. And there's no proof that can penetrate academia, because it really literally destroys virtually everything they have tried to indoctrinate us into believing that there is no God, and get what you can now and pay for an education so you can get a piece of paper. It's become a total search for money from vulnerable kids now, basically. That's what's going on. Sorry to have to say it, but we have to change everything. It's got to start all over. Somebody did a search on AI or something, and if you can do this, I don't know how to do that kind of stuff, but if you could do that, just put in what I say happened. if these creatures were this big and were all of these things I'm saying, if light accelerates and, what would have to change in science or in education? And you know what? It came back. Some guy did it. And he came back and said 100%. There's nothing that would be the same. There'd have to be new teachers, new schools, new education, new books, new everything. 100%. If you know how to paint, that's something. You wouldn't change that. But if you were a physicist or a geologist or a biologist or any ologist, cosmologist, astrophysicist, I don't care what it is, historian, I think I said geologist, but you can't say that too many times. It's just not a single thing would remain the same. Put it in. See if you could do a search on AI or whatever it is and say, tell me what would change if these things were true. And you'll be shocked. All right, all I can say is you're lucky you found Mudfossil University, because if you didn't, you're just going to be one more of the sheep. Okay, I'm going to leave it at that. This is the graduating class from Yale receiving their sheepskins. And at quite a cost for these little sheepskins. But if you don't have one of those, when you go to an employer, they say, do you have sheepskin? Oh, yeah, I went to Yale. Oh, come on in. How much money do you want? Well, I want so much money because I spent tons of money getting educated. All right, and if you have a trade, that's different. But for them to force you to take geology and all these other courses that are just wrong, and they know they're wrong now. There's nobody that is incompetent to understand that the things that I have shown are just not correct. And Yale has also done a paper on saying that there was exceptional preservation. They agree with all this stuff. And they were even talking about this, the same time frame I'm talking about, the Triassic. Only they put it back to 540 million years ago. I put it back to Velikovsky's account, 3,500 years ago. And 100% of the world had the same story and the same date. Okay, so if you were here in the last video, it was all about basically Velikovsky and what he claimed was written in the ancient texts, and I have verified this, and I have verified that these things exist on the earth, and they are quite literally true. And Velikovsky, of course, was destroyed for his thinking, and as anybody does. Now, the Colburn Bible, I'm just going to come up to this, because this is another one of these things that supports what Velikovsky said, and it's very interesting, the dates here. This is basically as big as the King James Bible, 3,600 years old. All right, remember that. That's very important to understand. We are in the year 2024. Velikovsky said all these events happened about 1500 BC. So if you add 1500 to 2024, you get up to 3500 and change. Well, this was written just before these events happened. Just before the events happened, which is this. When blood drops upon the earth, the destroyer will appear. Mountains will open up and belch forth fire and ashes. Trees will be destroyed, and all living things will be engulfed. Waters will be swallowed up by the land, and the seas will boil. All of these things I have presented, and they all happened. And trees were dissolved. Trees will be destroyed. Everybody's saying, well, all these giant trees. They were giant creatures, but most of the trees were destroyed. And all living things were engulfed, and all of the fleshy stuff preserved because of the salt water and basically cooking it. And then the body parts would actually disassociate from the boiling waters, just like it would if you boil a chicken. You boil a chicken, you just take everything apart, it just falls apart. And this is what happened. Whoop, right here. Hold on. Technical difficulty. Technical difficulty. All right. This is a lung, boiled right out of a human being's body. And it's flat as a pancake on the back because this was in the Great Flood. And they all boiled and died during this catastrophe. And this was about 100 years before it happened. They said, here is going to come, the destroyer, the frightener. They all had the same name, well, some different names, the same thing. The heavens will burn brightly and readily. There will be a copper hue over the face of the land, followed by days of darkness. A new moon will appear and break up and fall. It's all of this catastrophe, exactly what Velikovsky was talking about. All right. Velikovsky made predictions. He called them prognostications, advanced claims about what we would discover. And he was right in virtually every single time. And I am right talking about Bennu. The asteroid they landed on took a sample back to Earth here. That will be blood. It will be blood. I don't care what they say. It's going to be blood. Now, Sagan, who I don't like talking about people that have passed on in a negative way, except Sagan, I don't care because he was a waste of human life. He was the nastiest of nasty people against Velikovsky. To the best of my knowledge, there's not a single astronomical prediction that made in the worlds of collision sufficient prediction to be more than a vague, lucky guess. Everything he said was true, and they were so off the charts. Sagan said Venus would be maybe 5 degrees more hot than Earth, possibly. It turned out to be 800 and something degrees. Everything he said came true. Now, here's another one down here that at least he was honest. They come down, they say that they gave him credit for saying that there would be radio noises, which there were, and the heat of Venus, which it was. And this guy says that he wrote to Velikovsky, he was the chairman of the Space Board of National Academy of Science. He says, we are philosophically miles apart, philosophically. Because basically we do not accept each other's form of reasoning, which is logic. So he doesn't accept my logic, I don't accept his. I accept material evidence and the ancient text. He accepts something he was told by Einstein. All right, he says, I am, of course, quite convinced of your sincerity. Oh, you're trying to do it right, but you're just an idiot. And I also admire the vast fund of information which you have painstakingly acquired over these years, many years. This is 63. His book was rejected in 1950, and he had done all his research 20 years ahead of that. He says, I am not about to be converted to your form of reasoning, though it certainly has had success. Now listen to this. You have, after all, predicted that Jupiter would be a source of radio noise, Venus would have a high surface temperature, the sun and bodies of the solar system would have large electrical charges, and several other such predictions all came true. Some of these predictions were said to be impossible when you made them. All of them were predicted long before the proof that they could come up with a proof. So he predicted them long before anybody had that proof. And they were correct and came to hand. Conversely, I do not know of any specific prediction you made that has since been proven to be false. Let me read that again. He says everything you said came true, and conversely, I do not know of any prediction you made that has since been proven to be false. So everything he said was right, and nothing he said was wrong. I suspect the merit lies in that you have a good basic background in the natural sciences. Yes. And you are quite uninhibited by the prejudices of probability taboos. Yeah, he spoke up. He paid the toll for it, which confines the thinking of most of us. Yes, the thinking of you people are, what are they going to do to me if I say these things? And I better just not say them, I just better play along. Because nobody could be as incompetent as the scientists we have today. It's absolutely impossible. The only reason they could be portray themselves as this incompetent is so that they can keep up with their peers. It's you know, the winner now is the most incompetent, that stands up the hardest and screams the loudest about, you can't say this, you can't say that. And he says, whether you are right or wrong, I believe you deserve a fair hearing. And that's what they did not give him, ever.